Welcome to Philosophy in Pixels. It's a show in which we explore big ideas and do it all while old games play in the background. So, tonight we are going to be focused on a game that many of us may already know, a game called Hook. It's based on a movie that even more of us would know, Captain Hook, with Peter Pan, Captain Hook, Neverland, and the Lost Boys. But this version is different because Peter is not a kid anymore. He's grown up and he's forgotten, and he has to go back not only to rescue the children, but maybe to rescue a part of himself. And honestly, that's a good place to start a conversation around imagination. Because imagination, when a lot of us adults hear that word, we think, oh, that's cute, that's for kids. Imagination sounds like crayons or make believe or the part of your life that you outgrow when bills start coming. But philosopher Richard Carney says imagination is much bigger than that. For him, imagination is bound up in the human ability to envision possibility, to stand in the space between what is and what could be. His work maps a long history of imagination across biblical, Greek, medieval, romantic, existential, and postmodern traditions. And that matters because sometimes the crisis in life is not that we are unintelligent, it's that we can no longer imagine otherwise. So that's what makes Hook interesting. At the center of the story is not a child learning to grow up, it's a grown up learning he's forgotten how to be alive. Now that's a very adult problem. Not piracy, not crocodiles, not even Rufio's hair, though let's be honest, Rufio's hair has its own philosophical event. No, the real problem is forgetfulness. Peter has become efficient. He's become serious and busy and productive. And while he's the kind of person who probably answers emails when someone's talking to him, in the game, like the film, it's built around this strange movement, going backward in order to go forward, going back into memory, back into play, back into wonder, back into danger, back into imagination. Now, that's not childish, and that's profound. So maybe maturity is not the death of imagination. Maybe maturity is learning how to recover imagination without becoming naive. And that's where Richard Carney comes in. Carney is interested in imagination as a human power that makes meaning, creates worlds, and opens possibility. Not fantasy as denial, not hallucination, not lying to yourself, but a real disciplined human capacity to see beyond the immediately given, to ask, what else could this mean? What else could this become? What future is hiding in this moment? And that's why his work on imagination feels so rich. He doesn't reduce imagination to one thing. He shows that the imagination has had forms across history and that it remains central to how we interpret the world. He also warns that imagination can go wrong. It can become distorted. It can become manipulative. It can be cruel and self serving, which is why imagination is never just about creativity. It's also about responsibility. What are you imagining toward? What does your imagination serve? What kind of world is it helping to build? It's such a useful word for a moment. Because we usually talk as if the opposite of reality is imagination, but maybe the opposite of reality is not imagination. Maybe the opposite is imaginative collapse, the inability to see any future except the one that fear hands you. And this is where this Genesis game gets surprisingly deep, because in Hook, Neverland is never just a location, it's a test. Can Peter become again? Can he recover memory and courage and playfulness and movement? Can he stop being trapped in one narrow identity? Can he remember that he's more than just the tired version of himself? And that's a Richard Carney question, because in imagination, in this sense, it's not fleeing the world, it's reopening the world, not escaping reality, but rediscovering that reality still contains unrealized possibilities. Neverland becomes the place where Peter relearns the world is not closed, that he is not closed, that the story is not over. And maybe that's why old games can hit so hard because they often work with very simple mechanics. Jump and swing and move and fall and try again. But underneath that simplicity is a deeper drama, the self trying to remember its own capacity, remembering that imagination is not escape. So let me say this carefully. Some people hear this imagination talk and think, okay, so I should just daydream harder? No, that's too shallow. Carney's imagination is not just random fantasy, it's an act of mediation, a way in which human beings interpret experience, reshape meaning, and make room for the possible. Imagination can help us make art and tell stories and build communities and practice empathy and envision justice. It can also help us survive because when becomes flat and mechanical and exhausted, imagination says, there is more here than you think, there is more here than you think, there is more ahead than you think. And Hook gets that. Peter doesn't win by becoming more efficient. He wins because he becomes more whole. By remembering joy, by recovering play, by feeling again, by re entering the symbolic world that he had dismissed. That's not regression. That's not going to the past for some sort of daydream. No, it's retrieval. So there's something else that I love here. A Sega Genesis game is limited. It can only do so much. A few colors, a few buttons, a few animations, a few repeated sounds. But yet within those limits, it creates a world. It feels important because imagination is not about having infinite resources. It's about what you can do with what you've been given. So pixels become pirates, and a side scroller becomes a mediation on adulthood. And maybe life is like that too. We are finite creatures with limited time and limited energy and limited perspective. And somehow we still make meaning. We still dream. We still tell stories. We still imagine our way toward futures we cannot see. And that's beautiful to me. The imagination is not proof that we are detached from reality. It may be part of how we are most deeply in it. And so, what do we do with all of this? This episode leaves us with a simple question. What have I forgotten that I need to remember? Not in a nostalgic way, not I wish I were a kid again, but in a deeper way. What joy have I buried? What wonder have I dismissed? What playful energy did I mistake for immaturity? What vision of possibility have I surrendered because the adult world told me to be realistic? Maybe realism sometimes is too small. Maybe the realistic person is not always the wisest person. And sometimes the wisest person is the one who knows how to imagine. The one who can look at a wounded world and still say, hey, something else is possible. That's Carney. And also enough, that's Hook. A grown up Peter Pan moving through a pixelated Neverland, trying to rescue his children and recover his own forgotten self. That's not just a game premise, that's half of adulthood. So, tonight, when the Genesis hums and Peter runs through Neverland with his sword out, memory flickering, possibility opening, maybe the invitation is this. Do not confuse imagination with childishness. Imagination may be one of the holiest, most human things we do. It helps us remember. It helps us reinterpret. It helps us resist the lie that the world is finished. So maybe the mature life is not the life that abandons wonder. Maybe it is the life that learns how to carry wonder faithfully. Well, thank you for listening to Philosophy in Pixels, where sometimes an old Sega game can remind us that growing up does not have to mean forgetting how to fly. Thank you.